Just we are hearing an air alert. It could be a sign that Vladimir Putin is not really happy about a ceasefire proposal from US President Donald Trump. It even could be a sign that Vladimir Putin tried to humiliate Donald Trump because he continued to attack Ukraine after this big best offer from US President Donald Trump.
Yes, I think there's a danger sometimes that we react to everything that happens each day. There is a war going on, and Vladimir Putin and his forces will be looking to do everything possible to achieve their objectives. They're not stopping. We haven't agreed a ceasefire. They will keep pushing hard. And I suspect we would do exactly the same if roles were reversed. I don't think Vladimir Putin would want to humiliate President Trump. He would not want to make an enemy of the biggest superpower in the world. I believe a number of military analysts who think that the West has done enough to stop Ukraine losing, but has not done enough to help it win. And military forces in the West are far more powerful than Russia. If we were to get involved, Russia would be stopped straight away. And if Putin was to make an enemy of President Trump, and Trump suddenly decided to say, right, we're going to get involved, that would not be something that Russia would want. Putin has, every step of the way, has tried to scare the West not to get involved. So I'd be very surprised if Putin wants to insult President Trump. President Trump offers him a way out. It offers President Putin an off-ramp, a way to end the war. I'd be very surprised if he wants to humiliate him.
You just mentioned about air power in Ukraine, but can the UK, France and other allies provide this air cover over Ukraine without American Air Force? Without American power, would be enough British, French and other European air forces to stop Russia in the air without American commitment, without US air backstop?
Well, the short answer is I think the West could, but it wouldn't be as good. But I think the real question is that we're not suggesting that that air power comes in on day one and that Russia will be ready to attack Western air power on day one. That would be stupid for Russia to do that. Russia needs a break. It needs a pause in this war. It's run out of a lot of equipment on the ground. Its air force has been badly damaged. It has lost a lot of soldiers. The economy in Russia is being damaged. Inflation is high. They do not want to do another round of mobilization because a lot of casualties. So it might be that this is a good chance for Putin to take a pause. So that pause, it'd probably be 5 years or maybe more before President Putin's forces are ready again to have another bite at Ukraine. So I don't think Western air power needs to be very effective on day one. What it needs to do is to have some of its forces demonstrate commitment to Ukraine and then actually start to invest in Ukraine's own military capability. So at the moment, the West has given F-16s and Mirage 2000s. But it needs much more than that to be able to provide a counter to Russia. So I do think that the West will help Ukraine build that. And as the Ukraine builds its capability, the West may be able to gradually reduce its capability. So I don't think the argument is about day one. Day one, we're not suggesting at the moment that the West steps in and fights Russia. What we are suggesting is that that might be something which helps provide the security environment on day one that might be in place for a few years and then see what Russia does. Does Russia continue on a war footing, building tanks, building aircraft, munitions, or does it change its economy back to a peacetime economy, in which case the West might be able to relax a bit more and focus on building Ukraine's military.
What are the risks of Russian troops attacking European allies in Ukraine after the ceasefire deal, when it will be in place for months for years. What are the risks for that, and how would you see the Western retaliation to such actions of Vladimir Putin?
Yes, the risk is we get ahead of ourselves here because we have not seen a ceasefire yet. So I don't think we're talking about Western forces getting directly involved in the war. We're talking about them being involved to help in the peace. Clearly, there is a big risk to Western forces if they are on the ground facing off against Russian forces. But Russia would be really stupid to start killing United Kingdom or British or French or American soldiers on the ground, because that would probably do the one thing that President Putin doesn't want to happen, and that's to bring those countries into the war. It's a bit like, in World War II, where the Japanese attacked at Pearl Harbor. Suddenly it brought America into the war. If Russia was to attack Ukraine and there were British, French, American soldiers, it's very difficult to see that you won't get those countries brought in. And I suspect that's one of the reasons why America is very reluctant to be involved in that conversation. They probably say, look, we are 3,000 miles away from Europe. This is a European problem. It's on the European continent. And I think it is worth reminding viewers that for many years, NATO has been the security environment, but not all the nations have been paying their way. America spends that much on defence. If you add up every other NATO country's spending, it doesn't match America. That's everybody else in NATO. And when Trump was last in power, 2/3, over 60% of NATO members didn't pay their 2%, which was a baseline. It wasn't an ambition, it was a baseline. President Trump came back into power on the 20th of January, and still 1/3 of the countries were not paying their way. So part of what he's doing at the moment is saying, if NATO is to survive, Europe, you need to be spending your money. Russia is a European problem, it's not an American problem. So what are you going to do about it? Don't expect Uncle Sam to suddenly come rushing to your aid. And that's caused a massive problem for the West. Because in really simple terms, we gave a lot of our weapons to Ukraine. Now, when I was in the military, we never had more weapons than we needed. We always had slightly fewer than we needed. But we were still happy to give them to Ukraine because we didn't feel threatened. Today, all of a sudden, we see Russia as a threat because Ukraine may be in trouble now, and America walking away from Europe. So suddenly countries like Poland are going, we feel threatened now, and we haven't got the weapons that we should have because we've given them to Ukraine. So there's a massive effort at the moment to restock our own stockpiles, whilst at the same time working out how do we support Ukraine. So I do think it's very easy, I think, just to look at this through what's President Trump doing. There is a slightly bigger picture here, and it's a troubling time for Ukraine, but I do think it's meant that European leaders are now talking about getting more involved in this conflict, because they recognise that if Russia wins in Ukraine, if Ukraine falls, that is a danger for Europe, and therefore what is the West going to do about it?
Let's cover also possible scenarios of a ceasefire. I know it's a hypothetical question, but if European troops are being attacked by the Russian side, would you expect the US to participate in any kind of retaliation?
The danger of talking about hypotheticals is that it depends on so many assumptions. I think the Americans have been very clear that they do not see themselves involved in providing the backstop.
But would Americans in such case look weak if they don't respond, if they don't retaliate in case of Russia's attack on European allies, on European troops in Ukraine?
Well, no, I do understand the question, but I think that as we stand at the moment, America has said, America is focused on China and Europe should be focused on Russia. And therefore, I think President Trump is putting a lot of pressure on European leaders. What I don't understand is that President Trump has talked about doing this minerals deal, hasn't he? You know, the danger is we get into that, because I'm not inside his mind. I don't know what President Trump's actually trying to do. But what he's implied is that if you have American citizens on the ground helping extract minerals from the ground, if Russia was to attack, it would be attacking American citizens. And therefore, America would have a vested interest in protecting those facilities in Ukraine. Now, Donald Trump has not said that he would protect them, but the language is clearly suggesting that. Now, I don't know whether that is just for show. It's very difficult to see where American policy is at the moment. What we are hearing is what President Trump says. We don't know what the policy is. So at the moment, I think the clear message is Europe needs to step up and provide those guarantees. And let's be clear, when I was in the Ministry of Defence, our two big threats were China and Russia. We configured our military around Russia as being our main early threat. The war with Russia, your war with Russia, has demonstrated Russia is not as capable as we thought it was, and it has lost a lot of equipment. So compared to the threat Russia was before the war started to where it is today, Russia is not the threat to Europe that it was at the start of the war. The question is, how quickly could Russia build back up again? But that is a question that will take years. It's not days or weeks or months, it's years. And that buys us time to work out what we are going to do. And I think that's the problem that the West is. How do you turn on more money? So the UK has said 2.5% of GDP, Poland is nearly 5%. But even if I opened the money up completely and said loads of money, there is no shop that you can just buy these weapons. You have to invest in your defence industry to grow. It has to recruit people. Turning money into military capability takes years, but that process is now started, and I think Ukraine and its long-term security will have to be part of that conversation.
Ukraine has launched its largest attack on Russia, on Moscow, since the beginning of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine using long-range drones. Does this mean that Ukraine still has the cards?
Well, President Zelensky famously said this is not a game of cards, so I don't like using that language. I don't think it's helpful at all. President Zelensky has been very good at trying to find ways to hurt Russia. The drone attacks on Moscow did no damage at all. But what it does do is it demonstrates to the Russian people that they are in a war, that they are not safe. And that is a powerful message to send. The most effective drone strikes that Ukraine are doing are probably against the oil and gas facilities, because they have reduced Russia's ability to sell oil and gas, make money, and use money to generate weapons or buy them from Iran or North Korea. But President Zelensky has famously said he wants his industry here to build 1 million drones a year, and he's looking to buy over 4 million first-person view drones because they are so effective on the battlefield. But none of that is helping slow the advance of Russian forces on the ground. Over the last few weeks, Russia has increased the rate at which it has marched forward. So whilst I think I understand why the attacks on Moscow, the attacks on energy are a very good way of Ukraine fighting back, the key metrics of success in this war are territory, and Russia is seizing territory.
US President Donald Trump says neither Ukraine nor Russia has the cards. What is your reaction to the statement?
Well, first of all, I agree with President Zelensky that this is not a game of cards. What Trump is clearly doing is he sees negotiation a bit like a real estate deal. And if you're going to negotiate, what are your strong points and what are your weak points, and how do you negotiate? But that, I think, betrays a lack of understanding. President Trump has never served in the military, as far as I'm aware. It doesn't appear that he's taking any briefings from his military experts. In fact, he's sacked all of his senior military experts. So it's very difficult to see how he's making an informed judgment. And the problem with a real estate deal is that it's something tangible, it's property. And there's a lovely quote that says, not everything that can be measured is of value, and not everything of value can be measured. If you are sitting around a table negotiating, you're negotiating those things you can measure. President Zelensky is fighting for his country. That is about people. It's about courage. It's about your survivability, your culture, your people. How do you measure that? This is not about a simple negotiation. This is actually about how do you bring security to Ukraine. We return back, I think, to when I was last here, one of your colleagues, it wasn't you, but one of your colleagues, when we'd finished an interview, I asked them, how do you feel about the war? And they said, if we agree to end the war and we've lost territory, what was it all about? What a waste of lives. And I said, I'm really upset hearing you that, because as a military guy, you have lost a lot of good people in this war. We never expected in the West that Ukraine would survive that first onslaught, and you did. It was your courage, it was your professionalism, it was your sacrifice. That is now, Russia has only got a small piece of Ukraine, and if, eventually when the war ends, if you now have a robust security environment that stops Russia doing that again, then for the first time in 300 years, you will have a country that can build itself, that can, and will look back on this chapter as a great pride that you were able to survive and fight for your freedom. So I do think we have to be very careful. We live in the moment, and I don't want to see President Putin win. I don't want to see Trump agree some sort of short truce. I want to see the war ended. I want to see Ukraine flourish. I want to see Ukraine build and find its own way, build its economy, build a future of hope, of freedoms, of democracy, whatever it wants to do. But you have to end the war before you start that, and I think you have to be sure of your security environment. So, and I'm not sure that President Trump sees it like that. I think he just wants to stop the killing, do a deal, and walk away. I'm not sure President Putin is ready for that, and I doubt President Zelensky is ready for that.
Also, let's cover your visit to Ukraine, to Kyiv. What are your main takeaways from your visit?
I think, so I'm doing several things whilst I'm in Kyiv, but one of the main ones is to talk to people on the ground. I have a number of people who live and work in Kyiv, so I go for coffee or for dinner. And I always find it very humbling when I come here. I arrived late at night. The next morning, sunshine, walk out down to Maidan Square, and there was a parade because another soldier had fallen. I spent half an hour with the flags fluttering, and I find it very moving. And it's easy in the West just to see this as a war, and Zelensky and Putin and Trump. When you come here, you feel the pain, the suffering, the sacrifice. And it's also interesting to see early in the war, I was doing some media work, and several Ukrainian translators in the UK who I knew would drag me out for a coffee and give me a very hard time. Why are you so negative? We will kick Russia out. They've done this before. We will win. Why do you think we won't? But I do sense now there's a tiredness, a weariness in the country. You know, is this about winning? Is this about kicking Russia out of every corner? And whilst that was the view a year or two ago, it doesn't feel like that's the view now. It feels much more about, we need to bring this war to an end. We need to bring this suffering to an end. When is it going to end? How is it going to end? And I think that's a very different feel on the ground. Can I speak for the whole of Ukraine? No, of course I can't. You're much better placed to do that. But the value of being here, even just for a few days, and visiting and meeting and helping, all I think helps have a better awareness of what it feels like on the ground.
Thank you, Sean, for your time, for your support for Ukraine. It was a pleasure to speak with you in the National Aviation Museum here in Kyiv, or the National Aviation University, and glory to Ukraine.
Ukraine.
Героям слава. Thank you very much.
Good.